China made the pledges at the end of June during Chinese premier visit to Europe. Ms. Wu, two major pledges that the world is looking. One is the greenhouse gas emission peak by the year 2030 or even earlier. Second, the carbon intensity cut to 60 to 65% compared to 2005 by the year 2030. What do you think about these two pledges? How easy they are or difficult they are?
I wouldn't use just easy or difficult to describe it. I would use probably ambitious to describe it. And I think it's a very ambitious target, and China definitely is aiming higher. But this is also achievable. I think it's not so too far off because it's built on solid track record in the last 10 decades or so. Starting in the 11th five-year plan, we set a 20% energy intensity target. Then current 12th five-year plan, we added more. We set a 16% energy intensity target, a 17% carbon intensity target. Then leading up to 2020, back in 2009, we set a 40 to 45%. So it's steps forward. I think definitely China's today's commitment by 2030 is a step forward leading up to 2030.
But Mr. Wang, some have already said that at least the foreign analysts suggest China could do more. They were suggesting, carbon intensity, why not 70% or even more? And they say, well, the greenhouse gas emission peak, why not 2025 to make that promise? What do you think about these kind of analysis?
I think in terms of analysis, you can always try different possibilities. So there is always assumptions, indicators you can change and make the things with sometimes slightly different outcomes. But we should not forget there is also very strong uncertainties when we implement all those measures. Sometimes you can quite easily to change the parameters, but in the realities, they not always go the direction that you wish. So for example, today, China's economy is in the middle of the transition towards a more normalized, better structure and also energy structures, but nobody can say this is already being complete. And there is still risks that our economy may not be transformed into a more sustainable economy successfully and smoothly. So there is still uncertainty, and also there are uncertainties in the energy transitions, depending on where we get the energy and also the other issues. So I think you can never be 100% certain.
Mr. Li, from the Greenpeace perspective, there are two questions people ask when China has already made, many applauded these kind of pledges, but they ask questions. China did not answer as to what exactly is going to be the amount of the peak, let's just say, by the year 2030. And China did not say specifically as to how fast the peak would decline once the peak is being reached. So from what you read, from your knowledge and your conversations with experts, what are likely to be the possible answers to these questions?
Well, I think, let me just say I very much agree with the previous two panelists, but let me just also complement our view by saying that we very much view the 60 to 65% as well as the peaking around 2030 pledges as our starting point. It is a very important political step forward in our view. But again, we think given the latest energy transition in China, by which I mean, for example, the coal decline last year in China, we very much think that there are more space to enhance the ambition. And I think from a global climate point of view, what we saw so far for all the major emitters, their post-2020 climate target would not add up to help us maintain 2 degrees, below 2 degrees, and that's what climate scientists require us to do.
Okay. Well, I should ask you really this, Mr. Wang, because you are an expert on energy. So what do you make of the distinction, for example, between ambition and goal? That's one issue. The other issue is for the 2%, 2 degrees, as Mr. Li mentioned, how much is it in the eyes of the negotiators leading up to Paris this time? Or this is mainly becoming a target for the scientific and environmental community rather than, let's just say, the politicians and the negotiators for Paris? Help us to understand these 2 points.
Okay, let me answer the second question first. I think there is a lot of discussions around whether we can still achieve the 2 degree C target, and the commitment that China recently just pledged is still in the range of meeting a 2 degrees C, given that the other countries could also make the similar level of the commitment. But I think also there is uncertainties in the science. So what we are trying to do is we are, yes, at the range, within the range of relatively stable or secured climate targets, but we still need to work together with other countries to improve our ambitions, to raise up the efforts, so we will be able to more certain that we were going to avoid the climate change worst impact. So that is something we still add up from time to time, and also we need a review process to help us to understand what is the process of the climate change, because at the time we probably can do a lot of predictions, but we still have to check with realities.
That's true, because from now until 2030, even 2020, there's still quite a few years to go. What do you make of difference between ambition and targets?
Ambition is a direction. It's how high you want to go forward.
Exactly.
And when you set up a goal, even further to objectives, that's going to be very specific. Say, as milestones actually leading up to the future, your level of ambition. So you could say, my ambition level is this high, and I set the goal exactly the same level. Ambition is sort of, there's a lot of uncertainties basic there. Rather, and we are very ambitious. We want to we know the direction, we know the certainty. We definitely want to travel that way. Right. But in order to get there, probably we need to set the goals on a periodical basis so that we learn through that process so that we lead up to.
Talking about the goals on a periodic basis, Ms. Wu, the conference in Paris this time, later this year, is very different from Copenhagen. For one thing, Copenhagen is trying to set up a global mechanism with which to monitor every country's target and how it's been meeting the target with a global mechanism. But this time, it is not going to do that, because that's mainly how Copenhagen failed. But on the other hand, we cannot just let countries go freewheeling and pledge whatever they want to do, not necessarily following up on their goals. So what is the likely balance that's going to happen globally on this point?
I think the biggest difference between Copenhagen and this year is this: Copenhagen is more like top-down, and now learning through the failure actually of Copenhagen, now we're giving more space to bottom up.
Bottom up meaning countries leading to international
voluntarily say,
yes,
this is my intended actually contributions there. That's why it's called NDC. But in the meantime, it's not a freewheeling. It's not like say whatever you said, that's it. Rather, the international process is also negotiating to set up a review process, to set up a reporting process. So to make sure, say whatever you said you're going to do actually a country on the table, that's going to put in a framework, make sure you review that or even adjust that actually along the way.
On that, Mr. Lee, we've already heard in our backgrounder that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, was talking about the speed the countries are pledging for their targets for the Paris conference. He said it's as slow as the snail, and he's very much urging countries to act more and faster. But we have not been seeing much actions at all. Are you optimistic as to what capitals would do, even though China has already pledged?
Well, I think we are in a very, very different position than 6 years ago when we were before Copenhagen. I think there are very, very high level and very, very extensive political attention be given to the issue of climate change. I think just two cases in point. One is the U.S.-China climate joint announcement that happened last November. You now see the two topest emitters, their leaders coming together and declaring their long-term climate goal. And I think the other example is the recent Chinese submission of the post-2020 climate target during Premier Lee's visit to Paris, France will be hosting this year's climate summit. So I think these two cases highlight the fact that there are very, very high and extensive political attention. And with that, I'm hopeful that the Paris conference this year will make a difference.